Welcome back to Basics. So this episode we're going to be preparing to go to Duna. Please join us. So we're going to go to Duna, and this time I want to land on Duna. So because I am a little nervous about putting some of our Kerbals at risk, we're actually going to do sort of a prep in the way that the Apollo system worked. And well, first of all, you can see I'm actually building a lander, and this is going to be a two-stage lander. It's going to have a descent stage, and it's going to have a return stage, or an ascent stage. So what you're looking at now is the ascent stage. It's going to have two nuclear engines because they're just really efficient. And I could use normal liquid fuel engines. But I also thought if I use nuclear engines on this, I can maybe use it for actually pushing the entire craft that we take all the way from Kerbin. So I was actually at this point planning on, okay, we'll use these two engines as our driving force engines, and that's really easy. You only have to take liquid fuel, no oxidizer free mission. Brilliant. I also know I'm going to have to dock because I'm going to leave something in orbit that's going to help us get back. Now, because I'm a scaredy pants, what I could have done is just left a fuel tank in orbit, or a fuel tank and some accommodation in orbit. But I actually, you'll see later, I got a bit scared and I wanted a little backup just in case. So this is probably not as efficient as it could be, and I probably pay for that in the future, I'd imagine. So we're actually going to prep this craft first, and we're going to do some dry runs with it. We're going to build it. And you can see I'm putting RCS on now. I'm not going to talk too much about the build process. You can watch it. You can see what's going on. We're going to do some dry runs, a bit like the Apollo sort of program did. So they did launching the Apollo craft into orbit of Earth, and they did launching the Apollo craft, the command module, and the lander into orbit of Earth. They did orbits of the moon before they went and then returned, and then finally they did the actual landing. So Apollo 11 was the 11th technically the mission of the Apollo program, but all of the ones before that were basically building up to it. So you had basically dry run after dry run after dry run, in the same way that they'd done with the Gemini missions, where they developed the idea of docking and long-term time in space, and basically done the groundwork for Apollo. Well, Apollo itself actually did the groundwork for itself as well. If you actually look back at the history of Apollo, you'll actually see that the Saturn V wasn't the only craft to actually launch the Apollo. You got I think the Saturn 1B launched the Apollo as well, and that was just because they wanted to test it and boilerplates of it around Earth. So we're going to do something similar today. We're actually going to end this episode's going to be about preparing. But it's not just going to be about building or just flying around the Earth. We're actually going to aim to land on the Moon, and I've chosen the Moon because it's got a decent amount of gravity. It doesn't have the thin atmosphere that Duna has, so I can't really test that. But then I can't really test that coming back into Kerbin. Also, after our last Duna mission, I want to actually make sure that we have decouplers in the right places and things like that. So we're going to run a few little tests, and I'm still, you can see here, I play around so much with the RCS on this craft, it is just stupid. The irony being, in the end, that is not where the RCS ends up. And it's actually a perfect little example as to how you can overthink something. And I was actually trying to be quite artistic with this in where I put it. And there we go, I start to think about, what if I don't put it there at all? How much do I need? And this is actually where my thinking changed a little bit with this craft, because I started to think about who's going to do the docking. And originally I'd had in my mind that the lander craft there would be doing all of the work. It would do the landing, it would come back up, it would dock to the main craft and everything. But then I started to change my mind a little bit about it. So we have to give the orbital craft, the orbiter, a bit more sort of control. So there you go. I'm building my orbiter here, and you can see it looks very similar actually in sort of structure to our original Duna craft. It has more fuel store on it. It is a more capable craft, shall we say, and it's been thought out a little bit more. And you can see I'm thinking, okay, that's the structure. I built the lander separately, and then I brought it into the same save so that I could actually look at delta V, and that's actually worth doing, looking at delta V of combined and separate, so you can calculate things. So this is our first little test run. We've got random crew on board. I think we've got is it Bill and Jeb and someone else, and we've loaded them up into the craft, so we've got all the seats ready. And this will be a 3-man mission because we've got a 3-man return capsule, but we're going to give them extra space. And you can see that when they get up here, when we actually get rid of the fairings in a second, you'll be able to see that we've got, on that craft, we've got a hitchhiker compartment, we've got the actual capsule itself, and then we've got the lander. So we've got a lot of well, not a lot of space, but we've got some space on there. We're not crazy. So this first test was actually just docking. So we've taken it up, and I've purposefully not actually attached them how they're going to be in the final mission, because I just want to see what they're like docking wise. We want them to be in different angles, and I just want to play around with both of them and just see, you know, RCS balance and stuff like that. What I did notice was I really wanted to do an easy quick docking, so I can do the normal anti-normal approach and they will dock like that. They hold position, and we're basically just rotating them around each other now, just practicing how they move, what maneuverability they've got, RCS balance. I would recommend, if you've got the funds, this is a career mode thing, so I'm actually burning the funds doing this because I'm not bringing these back down in this form. I'm going to bring the capsule back down, and that's it. So I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, what have I actually got that is mobility and so forth? And you can see here that is one of the worst dockings I've ever seen. It is at that point that I decide, right, you know what, we're going to put a little bit of robotics on here. So I do actually, I think after this mission, install a robotics card that allows the craft to keep target, because none of our crew are actually that good. So we do a little modification, we change the positions. I add in some extra bits and bobs. Solar panels would be useful because I've realized I've not got electrical generation on these craft. Again, trial run, didn't need it. It was a short stay. I will say I cut out the return because I didn't think you needed the return from orbit. I thought that was going to be a bit pointless for you. I'm also changing the engines on the bottom and their position because I wasn't too happy with it. I wanted to get a bit more thrust from it. And this is it. We put on a little command unit there, a little control unit there that gives us the ability to set target, because we have one on the lander but not on the orbiter. And again, at this point, I'm still debating how many crew I send. So, you know, everything's very much up in the air at this point because I'm trialing this craft. Docking ports are flexible, so strut. So we put a couple of struts on there, and we go back out to the pad, and we launch again. And we're gonna do this now. So we've done our little docking experiment. The next one is I want to test re-entry. I want to test whether these things can actually thrust. And as I said earlier, I was originally planning to actually do the main burns with the lander's engines. I was still thinking about it at this point, and this experiment here was actually part of that. So with them strutted the way they are, I'm quite aware of the fact that there's potentially a very large heavy craft on the end of that lander, so that the actual orbital craft, the orbiter, is the heavy mass here. And I'm concerned about flex in the docking port particularly. So what we're going to do is we're going to burn out as if to go to the Mun. We're not going to go to it, we're going to burn out to it and then come back. But I just want to see, right, you know, if I'm doing a long-term sort of scale burn, because going to the Mun in terms of delta V is not actually that much different to Duna. I mean, you do have extra, and you can see here I'm using the lander, and then I start trying to pump fuel backwards and forwards, and this is where you know what, I should have burned the lander out and then refueled it. But this actually made my mind up for the mission, I think, which was moving fuel around and pumping fuel around. It leads to insanity. It actually does. With a craft where you've got so many tanks like this that are parallel and not locked together and so forth, it is just insanity. I think if I was doing this again, what I would actually do is probably have and I was going to use the two engines, I would probably, and I wouldn't recommend this, but this is what I would probably do. I would probably have fuel lines running into the two outer small tanks from our main craft. And then those fuel lines from those two into the engines. And that's how I would do it. I wouldn't do the pumping of fuel like this from one craft to the other. I think it's crazy. We've got a lot of symmetry going on, and I think it just confused Kerbal. You can see here it's pumping into some. I've just got screens absolutely everywhere, and look, it's a world of screens right now. I mean, it is utterly crazy. do not do it. Don't do it. Seriously. So it's at this point I took note of what was going on and thought to myself, this is not going to work. So I decide to continue teching it, because if I can get it to work at all, it potentially is going to shorten my burn times by half, or by 50%. They're going to be twice as quick, which makes them more efficient and makes just the entire process more pleasurable. So I do try and do this, but if somebody can tell me why I've got so much issue with this and maintaining balance, I think what we actually ended up in the end with was that we actually got asymmetrical fuel balance. And luckily I trialed this before going to the Mun, because if we'd have done this on the way to the Mun, rebalancing those tanks without, a TAC fuel balancer or whatever you want to have, would have just, I think, ended up in complete craziness. But yeah, so I spent a good, and this is sped up nine times faster than I did it. I kept going backwards and forwards. Looking at the lander design already, what I should have done is actually stopped and rethought at this point. But I quite liked it. I start flicking around, and because I'm actually having issue with the fuel flow, and I do not understand the fuel flow situation. And then I make the decision, you know what, we're not going to mess around with it anymore. We're just coming home. So we transfer all the crew to our orbiter craft, check its position, do a little bit of RCS burning, make sure not to destroy our solar panels, that's something to remember, and put ourselves into a return trajectory. And this is basically going to be, it's not going to be a return from Duna test, but if nothing else, it will actually test that the craft separates properly, and that the crew are going to survive parachute opening and things like that. I actually think we may have gone through the atmosphere on a speedy time warp there, which I thought they'd fixed, but obviously not. So if anybody can actually tell me, you want to slow down the video there, I'm pretty sure that I actually managed to go through the atmosphere, which I've seen happen many years ago, but I haven't seen in one of the new versions since I've started playing again. So yeah, so it's a simple return. I'm actually worried at this point. I'm like, are the parachutes going to open? Drogue chutes open. This is me using drogue chutes for one of the few rare times. I haven't really used drogue chutes before, but after our last few flights, drogue chutes are sort of in for me now. I see a use to them. We land on a corner, and there. So here we go. The mission to the Mun. I'm going to speed up the launch again. It is the same profile. I would really like it if I can understand why people use MacLeod to actually do this, or they use KOS. I'd really like to get into KOS and actually be able to do it. It's something, if anybody wants to teach me how to do KOS, would be brilliant. Because those automated launches, once you've got a craft of a set size with a standard payload, absolutely superb. And I tend to build my craft and reuse them, as you've probably seen from the first 3 or 4 episodes of this series. I reused the same launcher there over and over again because it was a similar payload craft. Before my break from Kerbal, I played a lot of Realism Overhaul and RP0 it was then, and it paid you to actually do that, to actually have a standard launcher that you reused and then it upgraded. Note to self, I actually activated the nuclear engines there one by one manually, and you saw it start to slew around. If I'd have done that with another engine, a more powerful engine, that craft would have gone into a spin and I would have lost it. So I'd have been better off throttling back and then doing it, but I didn't. So learning as we go. So I am at this point trying still, because I think the last time I did it, it wasn't its fault. It's obviously my fault. I give another go to using the landing craft to do all the maneuvers and doing the fuel burn and so forth, and then I give up. I just, balancing that fuel is just not working for me. So I use the main engines, and then I realised that I've turned them on and off, and it was very much a practice mission. There was a lot of lost Delta V here, and in a real world situation, a Kerbal world situation, what I should have done is actually return to the planet at this point and start again once I decided on the burn characteristics I was going to do. I didn't, because you know what, it's Kerbal. We've tested it on the run. It's rare to actually do a dry run like this. I'm sure many of you probably won't even do it, but I quite like the idea of this sort of Apollo mimicry. It's also a bit like some of the NASA and the USA led sort of approaches to going to Mars. There's a lot of talk of using the moon as a practice ground or going to the moon first and all that. And partly that is about developing the technology. Partly it's about the media attention, and partly it is about getting the skills, because 50 years ago, 60 years ago, the world went to the moon. Well, the USA went to the moon, and humans haven't really been back there. There's I can't remember how many men have been to the moon. Is it 12, 10, something like that? It's not a lot of men. No women, and it's sad, but it's been a long time. I recently saw a post on Twitter where it was the United Arab Emirates were talking about landing on the moon and so forth, and they had a picture of their flag on a background on a picture that was Neil Armstrong on the moon. And I thought that's really quite sad that how many people don't realise that that's not a real picture. It's been doctored because they just don't have up-to-date images of somebody going to the moon. But then I also realised that Neil Armstrong and half the men that have been to the moon are actually now no longer with us. God rest their souls. And that's not that they died in accidents. A lot of them died just of old age. So it's a long time since we've been there. Anyway, enough of the moon chat and Mars chat. Let's get back to Kerbal. So, we come in, we do our thing, and again, now because I'm going to do an orbital rendezvous, I want equatorial. The original Apollo missions, when they were going to the moon, they looked for specific characteristics. They were looking for equatorial primarily, and they also looked to land when the sun was at sort of a low angle to give them shadow, so they could judge their landing situation and they could see debris and so forth. We don't need to worry about the position of the sun or Kerbol for this, apart from the fact that it provides us with electricity, and it would be nice to actually see what's going on. And regarding the inclination of our landing, we don't really, it's not really that important. I could have, I can always go into a polar orbit or change our inclination, match planes, because we have oodles and oodles of fuel on this craft. So a plane change is not out of the question. However, when it comes to Duna, I will not have that fuel. So this is why I'm looking at equatorial, because putting that massive plane change in there, it's not realistic. Now, if I was coming here purely for the science, purely for the exploration of the moon, I'd probably go and land on the poles, because you know what? I've got the fuel. It's not a big problem. But we're actually we're doing this for a purpose. This mission is, prepare for Duna, because I don't want to strand 2 good pilots and a scientist on Duna. I don't have a massive pilot course. If I have to send a rescue craft, that takes out not just the 2 that are stranded there, but it also takes out the rescue team as well for 2 to 3 to 4 years of this gameplay. And I'm trying to overlap my missions at the moment, so I can't really hire any more Kerbals. I have money, but I don't really want to use it. So we are sending down 2 newbies to the surface. I've actually crewed this with new Kerbals that we've just hired. These are 2 new Kerbals, I believe, and the reason being that, number 1, I want to get them experience. It should be a safe mission. Number 2, it sounds horrible, I can't afford to strand good crew on the moon right now, because getting them back will take too many people out of commission. I have some things coming up that require Kerbals, and I need experienced guys for that. So anyway, it's a standard landing. I come down about 5 kilometers. I'm really reduced my speed. My horizontal velocity is pretty much cancelled out well before 2 kilometers above the surface, and then it's just basically riding the nuclear engines. The pull of gravity on the moon is slightly less than Duna, I'll be honest with you there. So I'm not really having to push it, but also I don't have an atmosphere, I don't have parachutes assisting me, so it's a bit in between what I'd expect. It's not a perfect mimic of what we're going to expect, but it's okay. The landing was rough. One thing I didn't notice and I should have, was just how close that materials bay is to the ground. It sticks down. It actually reminds me of there's a robot in an old science fiction movie that used to walk around with a hanging bottom bit like that. It just reminds me of it. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head now. So we one of the reasons, the other reason to come to the moon was I thought, you know what, we'll put up a little science station on the moon, because we don't have one at the moment, and it's free science, and it's a reason to be there. So we've set it up. We wait until the correct time, and we wait until we get sunlight. We're going to look around, make sure that we're actually going to be similar orbited, and we go. You'll notice we launched, but we're still taking the landing stage with us because it's stuck. Now, should that happen on Duna, we're probably okay. I don't know. I have not modified the craft though. I decided that was my fault because of the way that I actually disengaged the stage, and I think, hopefully I will have learned from that before we go to Duna. However, if this was NASA, we would be redesigning the entire craft, and in fact, if this was me, I should redesign that and look for clearance. What we actually got was the nuclear engines catching. So we get up into a semi-orbit. We're up high, and we're basically going to circularize our orbit. I could have gone for a direct rendezvous, but it was just easier sticking it in a higher orbit and then waiting for our orbiter to catch up. And then we do the standard rendezvous where, when it gets sort of coming near us, we're going to drop our orbit down on top of it until it gets near. Now, it was at that point that I realized I wasn't in the same plane, so I did a quick plane change, which didn't take much, to be honest, because it's the moon. And then I used the clever little next orbit button so I can figure out the exact time I need to do this thing. When I started, that wasn't there. This is something I've learned. It's wonderful. So you can set your maneuver up to rendezvous, to do your Hoffman transfer, and then you can hit that button until it comes up to somewhere near, and then spin the node around the orbit, and wham bam, you have your encounter. It's a lot easier than the old days where you used to have to guess it. So I switch back to the orbiter, and I'm now going to be looking around to try and see what's going on. So I set the orbiter, I think, to at that point, just to see what's going on, to target. And then we're looking now. We're just chasing. I'm doing a little bit of burning here and there, and I see that we're actually on a separate track, and I'm just sending it into the future. I'm burning towards my target, and you can see that it's coming closer and closer together. Once we get near by each other, I will go into retrograde in relation to the target, and I'm just gonna slow myself down because I'm going to overshoot, because I'm coming down from outside to past it and underneath it. So I know I'm going to be going faster. I slow myself down, and then I start to watch the distance between us, and I let it go up and up, down and down and down, until it starts to go up, and that's then when I start thrusting again towards it. Okay, I zero out my velocity in relation to it, and I keep doing that, and it takes two turns there. So here we go. I go back to our orbiter, and we're going to do the MacLeod. We are actually going to do the MacLeod patented docking here, where we just go face target, because we've got rookies on board. I don't want to mess around. We're just going to use the probe bodies to do this, and we just push them towards each other. Yeah. And this is very forgiving. I could have actually done this with the nuclear engines. I don't actually need to use the RCS for this. It is so easy. I mean, look, I'm about to miss, and they turn on to each other. Absolutely stunning. Love it. Absolutely love that way of doing it. But it doesn't take the skill it used to. So if you are practicing docking, please do it that way, but also try it the old-fashioned way as well. Right, now I'm trying to do what I would consider the science transfer, and I realised that it's not really working. So you'll see that the entry hatches aren't lined up with each other. So because I haven't done my own docking today, I decided to do it manually. You can see I just take it, undock it, rotate it round till it lines up, and then I'm just going to thrust in, and there we go, nice and easy. And if you, in reality, you probably wouldn't do that. You'd probably line it up to first place, but there are flaws with the different methods of docking out there. So we put all of our guys into the command pod now. We've taken all the science out of there. We've decoupled it You see there? So it's gonna the lander is now gonna just stay in orbit around the Mun, and then we just do our standard burn home, and then that's it. This mission is done, with the exception of re-entry, which is, again, we've already tried re-entry from a semi-height. We know the parachute's working now. It's just a case of, you know, do I get the entry height right? Is it going to be okay? Are we going to have any problems? So this time we come into Kerbin. Lovely view there. We decouple, hit the atmosphere full in the face. We're aiming at about 35 kilometers. Parachutes open up. Whoop-de-doo. Drogue shoots. We come down nice and fast. You can see I've sped this up. So until next time, have a great one.